Good afternoon, and thank you everyone for being here. I'm Caitlin Coleman, Water Education Colorado's Publications and Digital Resources Managing Editor. We've really been looking forward to bringing you this webinar on tribal water in Colorado. And we have a really special program today, but before we jump into it, we're here with Water Education Colorado's Executive Director, Jayla Poppleton, who is going to welcome you as well.
Thank you, Caitlin. Welcome, everyone. We are so glad to have you all with us today for this very important conversation that expands upon recent coverage that we produced on tribal water concerns in the Headwaters Magazine spring issue. If you didn't receive a copy of that issue, you can find it on our website, and we would also be happy to get you a copy. All of our members receive subscriptions to Headwaters Magazine, so consider plugging in that way if you haven't already to support and stay connected to our various programs. Today, Caitlin has pulled together an outstanding lineup of presenters, all of whom are volunteering their time to be with us today, and we're honored that they're contributing their time and expertise for this program. So let's give them our full attention and learn more about opportunities for supporting the water needs of our tribes here in Colorado.
Thank you, Jayla. As she said, we do have a lot of amazing speakers lined up this afternoon. We'll hear from Scott McElroy and Mike Preston, who were involved in the Colorado Ute Indian Water Rights Settlement. They'll help us understand what that settlement was, and we'll shine a quick little light on the history, relationships, negotiations, and conditions that made it possible. Then we'll hear from tribal leaders. We have Chairman Hart with the Ute Mountain Ute Tribe and Council Member Cloud with the Southern Ute Indian Tribe. They'll bring us up to the present with what has happened since that settlement and a look toward the future. Finally, Amy Ostdiek with the Colorado Water Conservation Board will round out our discussion by sharing the state's role in working with the tribes and negotiating for the future of the Colorado River Basin. Steve Wolff with the Southwestern Water Conservation District and I will be your moderators. We'll hear from Steve in just a minute. But first, I'd like to thank the Colorado Water Conservation Board for their support. Next, I'll remind you to please remain muted during our presentations. We'll allow 15 minutes for Q&A at the end of our time together, at which point we invite you to turn on your cameras and unmute as you pose questions. If you wish to communicate during the presentations, please use the chat. You can type questions in there as they occur to you, and we'll jump to them later to answer them at the end of our program. And the webinar is being recorded, so we'll share the recording after we're done, probably tomorrow. So back to our topic for Water Education Colorado. As Jayla said, we organized a webinar to take each issue of Headwaters Magazine off the page and dive deeper into the subject matter. Our most recent spring issue of Headwaters focused on tribal water throughout the basin, the Colorado River Basin. I encourage you to flip through the magazine. Halen Goodluck, Indigenous journalist who wrote our feature, he reported that 12 of the basin's tribes in other states have unresolved water rights claims. But Colorado is different. There are 2 tribes with reservations in Colorado who we'll hear from today, and the negotiated settlement determined what their water rights would look like. But we're here still some 35 years later now, and there's more to do to ensure full access to that water. So we'll hear more on those stories today. With that, I'll hand it over to Steve Wolff, General Manager of the Southwestern Water Conservation District. Southwestern is a really great partner to WECO in general, but they've also been a great instrumental partner in presenting and coordinating our webinar today. Steve?
Thank you, Caitlin, and thank you to Water Education Colorado for hosting today's webinar and for the recent issue highlighting tribal water perspectives in Southwestern Colorado's 2 sovereign nations. For those of you who don't know Southwestern Conservation District, we were established 81 years ago by the Colorado General Assembly to protect, conserve, use, and develop the water resources of all or parts of 9 counties in Southwestern Colorado. The district championed the Dolores and Animas La Plata projects, which set aside water for tribal needs. Southwestern greatly values its long-standing relationship with the Southern Ute Indian Tribe and the Ute Mountain Indian Tribe, and is honored to be a small part of today's presentation. I am pleased to introduce our first 2 panelists, Scott McElroy and Mike Preston. Scott McElroy has had a long career as an attorney and successfully negotiated multiple tribal water rights settlements in the West. He represented the Southern Ute Indian Tribe in negotiating the Colorado Ute Indian Water Rights Settlement. and was instrumental in completion of the Animas La Plata project. Mike Preston served on the Ute Mountain Ute Tribe negotiating team for the Colorado Indian Water Rights Settlement and as project development coordinator for the 7,700-acre tribal farm and ranch enterprise that resulted from the settlement. Mike managed the Dolores Water Conservancy project for 12 years, which supplies settlement water to the tribe. He returned to the tribe as a water consultant after retiring from the Dolores project in 2019. Notably, Mike was recognized in 2021 with the Water Education Diana Hoppy Leadership Award. Welcome, Scott and Mike.
So I'm hoping everyone can hear me. I've put up on the screen a PowerPoint that I was going to use today and try to present today a short and brief historical perspective of the settlement with an emphasis on the role that the Animas La Plata project played in that settlement and some of the twists and turns that the settlement took and I present this from the perspective of someone who represented the Southern Ute Indian tribe from 1985 up until 2018 when I retired. So I obviously have one perspective on it. I know there are a number of folks like Lois Whitty, who was involved heavily in the original settlement discussions, Christine Arbogast, who was a critical part of moving the settlement through Congress and keeping everybody on track, who may or may not have a different perspective on this. But I think maybe the first thing to do before we move along is to talk about what the underlying issue is. Many of you that are here are lawyers and know this, but I suspect there's a fair number of folks who don't know the legal principles that were involved. Tribes have federal water rights recognized under federal law called reserved rights or winners' rights. They are very different from state law-based water rights in that they vest at least as early as the establishment of the reservation. They do not require actual use to become vested. And they are tied really in many ways to the needs of the reservation rather than actual use and to allow for the development of the community on the reservation, the tribal community, as well as the resources on the reservation. So they don't line up very well with state law rights. And that issue has lingered in the West, as Caitlin said in the beginning, with many tribes not having quantified water rights, even though the existence of the rights is not really disputed today. The full nature and scope of those rights are unknown. And that's what faced us in 1985 when the settlement discussion started. So I thought today what I would try to cover is, one, why people wanted a negotiated settlement, a very quick overview of the Southern Ute Tribes' water rights, and the role and evolution of ALP in the settlement. There were a lot of things that encouraged settlement. As I mentioned, the existence of the tribal rights and the fact that they could be of substantial magnitude, casting a cloud over other state law-based rights was made clear in the 1960s in Arizona versus California, where tribes were granted substantial rights on the Colorado River. The Wind River litigation in Wyoming had some similarities to the situation in Colorado, and I think taught both the state and the tribes a lot of, had a lot of lessons for folks to learn, in that the tribes in Wind River gained a substantial quantity of water, but no means to really put it to use. And the state of Wyoming spent $11 million learning that the tribes were entitled to almost 500,000 acre feet of water. There's also a great need for infrastructure in the region that couldn't be achieved through litigation. And that got people into settlement. Perhaps as important to anything was the nature of the leadership that existed in 1985 and is really carried through to today, in my view, of both very thoughtful tribal leadership, engaged state leadership, and very much so local leaders who wanted to see a resolution rather than a fight. Tribal fights over natural resources with their non-Indian neighbors proved to be very difficult. So what did people want to achieve through the settlement? Well, obviously, they wanted to meet the present and future needs of the tribes. They wanted to protect existing non-Indian water rights, and they wanted to avoid the nasty litigation that's occurred elsewhere over natural resources. And at the focus of that was both ALP and the Dolores Project, which were intended to increase the usable water supply in the region so that those goals could be achieved. The Southern Utes got approximately 125,000 acre feet of senior water rights recognized in the settlement itself. And we really had two negotiations. One was the original negotiations starting in 1985 and culminating in the Settlement Act of 1988. And then when the project was stumbled badly as a result of environmental concerns and cost concerns, there was a renegotiation in 2000 that put into place a greatly downsized project with only municipal and industrial water. The original settlement and the original project, while downsized slightly in the original settlement, had a substantial irrigation component that was important to both tribes, and obviously important to the non-Indian community in the La Plata Basin, which had fought and struggled for an irrigation project using the Animas water in the La Plata for a long time. We ultimately had to downsize the project in the 2000 amendments, and it became only irrigation, only M&I water for both tribes. I see my time is clicking away, so I'm going to offer up two conclusions about what was successful here. One is we avoided the train wreck of 20 or 30 years of litigation over the tribal water rights, which I think would have destroyed the sense of community that exists in Southwest Colorado and really created a long-term obstacle to successful development of water by the two tribes. And two, what I think you will hear from the tribal leadership is that it's really only the foundation that we were able to put together here for future tribal benefits. It's a good foundation, it's solid, it is legally secure, but there's a great deal of work to be done for the two tribes to see the benefits that are can be achieved through both the recognition of the water rights and the infrastructure development at ALP in particular that is yet to provide hard benefits to the two tribes. So I see that I've extended my time, and I'll leave it at that for now.
Thank you, Scott. So with that, we'll turn it over to Mike.
Good day to everybody. Really appreciate your kind of interest in this and looking forward to some good discussion. I'm trying to share my screen here and yeah. Outstanding. Okay, slideshow. What's that? Okay. All right. So as Steve indicated, my background in this goes back really to the early 1980s. What I would like to focus on, kind of with my time, is what was at the core of the settlement of the Ute Mountain Ute claims. I'm going to start and really the Ute Mountain Ute tribe had winners' rights claims on the Mancos River, which actually runs, as you can see, it runs through the reservation. Jackson Gulch Reservoir was built, resulted in the irrigation of these non-Indian lands with no inclusion of the tribe. Very, very clear breach of the winners doctrine. And so that was a claim that needed to be resolved. And as we go forward, we'll see kind of what the tribe decided to take in exchange. I mean, they potentially could have dried up all of this land, but the opportunities to irrigate lower down in as you'll see in the next slide, lower down in the Mancos River are not nearly as good as what was accomplished with the Dolores project. So here's a little bit bigger view of the situation. We're a little bit, whoops. So you can see, the Mancos River, it's covered up right now with icons, but the Mancos River sits over here. And this is the McPhee Reservoir, which is near the town of Dolores. And then the brown spot here is the city of Cortez, and this is Toyac. So as you can see, the Mancos River is very canyony and would have been very difficult. I mean, it would have taken pumping up onto benches and everything to really try to put that water to use if they had exercised their senior claims on the Mancos River. With this particular plan, one of the outcomes that's really significant is that they were able to build a domestic pipeline from the city of Cortez down to Toyac to bring drinking water for the first time, and then also create 7,600 acres of irrigated land in this area down here. You can see the center pivot sprinklers in this aerial photo. So specifically, the settlement provided water from the Dolores project, 24,500 acre feet to irrigate 7,700 acres. And it resulted in a highly productive tribal farm. You see this is the other side of the toe of Ute Mountain. And you can see in this photo, some of the 110 center pivots stretching off. I mean, these are basically verdant, when the water's there, verdant fields really in the middle of the desert. The other thing that the settlement brought was 100,000 acre feet for drinking water, M&I water for drinking and economic development. The drinking water is extremely important. It brought drinkable water to Toyac for the first time in their history. People had been drinking from front yard stock tanks that were filled by a water truck that went around. There was a very antiquated sand filter system for water piped into the house, which was undrinkable. So having that drinking water was a major, major breakthrough. It happened very early after the settlement was signed. And then the other thing is it set the stage for economic development. If you've ever been down 491, What you see there, there's a travel center, casino, hotel, RV park, and none of that economic development would have been possible without the water. These enterprises that I just described employ over 500 people, many of them tribal. Actually, Scott did such a good job on the Animas La Plata project, and I think Chairman Hart will probably address this to some extent. So I'm not going to dwell on this, except to say that the access to that water and being able to get it to a place of use on the reservation or elsewhere is an issue. And then really the assumption of the operation and maintenance costs. So there's a couple of barriers to really using that Animas La Plata project that are going to have to be dealt with going forward. The other reality is when the tribe got their allocation out of the Dolores project, nobody contemplated that we were getting ready to enter the deepest drought in 1,200 years, but that's what's happened. So the severe drought, drought-related allocation shortage of 21-22 are doing, severe financial damage, to the farming operation and stress on the land. I won't go into, kind of the details on the left-hand side, but to say that out of the 110 center pivot sprinklers, only 10 were operated. In 2021, it's not going to be much better in 2022. The tribe had built the bow and arrow corn mill and used most of their plantable fields to grow corn to supply the mill. And then they've also got a really outstanding cow herd, which is, so they've kept some alfalfa alive and planted some triticale to try and deal with those two things. And again, the constraints are still being felt. The corn mill, economy, I mean, their customer base was expanding. They've had to, and that expansion is kind of halted. And then they've already started selling off cattle, and their, unaudited net income losses in 2021, $2 million. And the farm and ranch and livestock employment decreased by 50%. Corn mill was down from 12 to 9 employees. This is just a picture of the bow and arrow brand corn mill. Like I said, markets are expanding, but the drought is halting that expansion as we speak. The other thing is the tribe has tried to do strategically, because they can't produce crops on most of their land. They're going through and replacing center pivot sprinklers that are 25 years old. They're installing micro hydro units on their farm laterals that are going to end up powering center pivots and headquarters in the future. And there's also the crews are going to be used to install new sectionalizing valves for better water management through a Native American Affairs infrastructure program. So the tribe's the farm is doing everything possible in this interim to improve efficiencies and productivity for those days when the water is back. So the philosophy is really how to produce more value with less water. And I just mentioned all the efficiency improvements that they're undergoing. They're also looking at water efficient crops. Hemp seed and custom sunflowers are currently being looked at. And then the tribe is planning to open a new grocery store, wants to provide fresh produce for tribal members. So that's another use of the water. And you can do quite a bit of these specialized crops with a small amount of water. So my closing thoughts are really go along the lines that Scott was talking about. There was this convergence of interest that made this settlement possible. But in addition to the alignment of interest, I mean, what drove those were the enduring relationships that develop and are still in place today. I mean, this settlement involved, tribal leaders, county commissioners, water districts, water engineers, reclamation officials, and their attorneys. There were state officials involved, CWCB, the Attorney General's Office, Division of Water Resources, and then our federal legislators and the lobbyist who's on this call, Christine, who guided us through DC and the state capitol. So I guess I would close my remarks by saying we need to convene those who are still living to capture, kind of this story which we all agree is a pretty remarkable story, because I think there's some lessons that can help us surmount the collective challenges going forward. So thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Mike. And next, we're going to turn it over to Chairman Hart.
How do you get out of this one?
Okay, while my secretary is getting my presentation ready,
Yes.
then I would just like to start out by saying,
Yeah.
Let's close this.
starting this, that we always thank the Creator. A lot of tribal leaders and
No, I
tribes
don't think
across
so.
this country always in their prayers, not only ask for prayers about their tribal members and what's going on in their communities, but also about the animals, the environment, everything that's around us. Water is life is the thing that we talk about a lot, especially during seminars like now and what's going on, and trying to come across an educational way of saying we need to have our prayers addressing everything across the board, from our people, from the youngest to the oldest, to everything that's living within this world that the Creator's created. The water we drink, water is life for everything, plants, animals, but also the air that we breathe, also the ecosystem that's a part of the process. So just wanted to take a look at that and put that out right in the forefront first.
Ready.
So my presentation with my overview, and I'll try to go over them as quick as I can to give Councilman Lorelei Cloud from Southern Ute some time to. Our Colorado, I'm also the tribal chairman for the 10 Tribes Partnership, and I represent 10 tribes on the Colorado River. We work with 7 states, 2 countries, and there's about 30 tribal nations within the Colorado River Basin, but there's 10 tribes that live on the Colorado River. Next slide, please. So our Colorado River Basin tribal perspective, the Colorado Ute Indian Water settlement of the uses and challenges that we face today, efforts to settle New Mexico and Utah water rights and relationship building. We must work together. As Scott made his presentation and Mike had done his presentation, these are kind of the areas that I'll be talking about. Next slide. So the 10 Tribes Partnership, here's a map of the Colorado River Basin and the 7 states, all the tribes that are involved in it, all the way down to the Mexico border there, and the Salton Sea down at the bottom. And we do try to advocate. We have met already with the Secretary of Interior as we start to look at how we're going to be moving. The 10 Tribes Partnership was formed in 1992 to help the Colorado River Basin better do a management, but they have to include tribes with their tribal water study to complete it and to get them involved. Tribes own probably about 25% of the tribal water rights within the Colorado River Basin. So we need to be able to quantify all of their water rights. Next slide, please. So as we start to look at this, if you can just bring the arrow down, addressing Utah and New Mexico. That's the New Mexico state line going across where the arrow is. And it goes all the way across. We own land in New Mexico and we own land in Utah. So we're in the very Four Corners area. So Ute Mountain Ute Tribe owns land into 3 states. So our Colorado Ute water settlement dates back to our original treaty of 1868. And we really try to do what we can to meet the needs of our membership. Our membership is 2,120 people expanded into 3 states, 600,000 acres total. So what we try to do is develop something that meets the needs of 2 communities, one in Colorado, which is Toyac, another community in Utah, which is called White Mesa, but no population base in New Mexico. So we're trying to quantify water rights in 3 different states. As Scott was talking a little bit earlier about Animas Plata, we do have 16,000 acre feet over at Lake Nighthorse and Durango, but we can't access it. When they done the original settlement, It was probably a 700+ million, 8 million water project to get water to both tribes. It came through Congress. It was downsized to ALP light, then went all the way down to ALP ultra light, and then eventually went back up to what it is today. But the delivery system that was supposed to come to Ute Mountain was taken out. So now we're trying to find a way to get water to the Ute Mountain Ute tribe. Plus Southern Ute is also working on trying to get water to their tribe. But one of the ideas was to bring it down through Animas Plata, Animas River down into San Juan. But then as soon as it crosses over the state line, then the compact says we lose our water right. And we're trying to get it to the very corner of Southwest Colorado, because it comes back into Colorado. Then we could deliver the water back up to Farm and Ranch. But we're not able to based on the compact. Each state has its own compact. As Scott was talking about the legalities of everything that's going on. So if we switch to the next one, please. So in Colorado, we've quantified all of our water rights. In Utah, we have not quantified any of our water rights. We're working on that right now. And for New Mexico, we're negotiating that in the negotiation process right now. Our next slide is the bow and arrow. As Mike was talking a little bit about this, we do have the farm side of it, which he talked a little bit about the different plants and things that we utilize to do a harvest. The majority of it is alfalfa. We started the bow and arrow brand for cornmeal, but we also run cattle. We used to run about 1,000 head of cattle on the bow and arrow side, the tribal side. But we also have another 1,000 of tribal members, individual herds. And way back about 20, 30 years ago, we used to run 3,000 head total. But due to the drought happening, we've been reducing, not enough feed. We do have 2 ranges, one in the reservation and one up in the mountains between Gunnison and Montrose. We have a 20,000 acre ranch up there. So majority of them go up there during the summer, 5 months, and the rest of them year they're down here during the winter months. So as we start to look at the tribal herd here, they graze out on the fields during the winter time. They do have alfalfa, triticale, and some other grass fields out there, and they're really prime cattle. And right now we're running about 675 mother cows, and we just recently started calving. We're running about probably 800 head of tribal herd. It's come down a little bit because of the drought. So we are looking at a management plan that really tries to help out on our cow-calf operations. We are getting some partnerships, and that's what the key is about the future. As I mentioned earlier in the beginning of my presentation, there's 30 tribes in the Colorado River Basin and 10 on the Colorado River. But we can't move forward unless we partner with other people like the state of Colorado, state of Utah, all the way down Wyoming, all the way lower basin, upper basin states, 2 countries. But we have to include tribes because they're the ones that are water rights are not quantified to the expectations based on the water treaties of each tribe. Each tribe is sovereign in their own way, and they each have that inherent right as they've been here since the time immemorial. And they've lost a lot of Aboriginal lands, and this is what it was reduced down to, what we have currently today. But based on the Winner's Doctrine, these rights, these water rights, also a part of what the process is going to be going into the future. This year's the 100-year anniversary for the Colorado River Basin Compact, but we also, that happened in 1922. We weren't recognized until 1924 as citizens of the United States, as Native American tribes across this country. 2 years later, we're finally recognized in 1924. So we just wanted to bring that out. There's a lot of things that happened between now and then, but we are now at the 100-year anniversary, and we're trying to be a part of the process to move forward with that. So as we start to create partnerships, it's something that we really needed to push for, and we did ask the Colorado Water Congress to reevaluate their process, and they included the seat for Ute Mountain Ute Tribe and Southern Ute Indian Tribe on the Colorado River Congress. We do have representatives in the state of Colorado. Becky Mitchell has been really key in helping us to advocate on behalf of the tribes in the Colorado River Basin. I'd like to thank everybody that has helped us get us up to this far. Next slide. And as we look at what's in front of us here, the new opportunities and economic development as our bow and arrow, looking at new things that are coming about. And with our farm project, Weenuch Construction was a construction company that built the Animas Plata. And then with the casino, and each one of the tribes as their own entities and enterprises as they start to move forward for economic development, what's out there for our membership. So with that, I'd like to just finish up that we are all in this together. We're all in this together, and we really need to work together to really help out each one of us, whether it's on the legal side, the hydrologies that are coming out from the scientific impacts. We are in a mega drought right now, and it has been declared a drought for our region here. And we really need to educate people about how to work together. And we have to support one another, from the states to the legislation to the tribes, but we all have to come to the table and all have a seat there and look at how things are going to be happening, because people are going to challenge it. People are going to say, I disagree or I agree with you, but at the end, we have to really look out for 40 million people that are going to be using this water, whether it's municipal, industrial, agricultural, environmental, right down to recreation. I went by Lake Powell about 2 weeks ago, and that is so low right now that some of the people are going to be starting to sell their boats off. But looking at the releases out of Flaming Gorge, Blue Mesa, Navajo Reservoir, to try to get Lake Powell up to where it's at, and saying we're not going to do any releases out of Lake Powell down to Lake Mead, is also going to be something about discussion, but it's going to be something that we really need to come to the table about. And time is of the essence. Time is really important. We don't have a whole lot of time, and the 500+ plan is just something that'll buy time for a short time, but we really need to look at where we're heading in the next 5 years is what we really need to get things going. The interim guidelines are up on 2026. That really has a say on the management plan of the Colorado River Basin. So with that, I'd like to thank everybody, thank our creator, and hoping that we get more precipitation in these mountains, because this is the head gates to the Colorado River Basin. So with that, thank you.
Thank you. So next up, we will hear from Southern Ute Indian Tribe Council Member Lorelei Cloud.
Well, thank you, everyone. It's really great to be here with all of you and to provide information. I think like the Chairman Hart had stated, it's really important for us to work together and to share our information, as much information as we can, because we are in this together. So let me get this started. Again, my name is Lorelei Cloud. I'm a member of the Southern Ute Tribal Council, and let me start here. My reservation is actually right next to my sister tribe, the Ute Mountain Ute Tribe. We're in the southwest corner of the state of Colorado, and it was stated earlier, there are only 2 tribes within the state of Colorado. So compared to other states, I think we have a really good relationship, again, with the state, and we're very proud of that. My reservation was established in 1868. The strip of land that we're on, as far as my reservation, the current reservation, 75 miles long and 15 miles wide. And it's a checkerboard reservation compared to our sister tribe at the Ute Mountain Ute. This is really important when we're talking about our water and the different situations that go along with that, because it makes things very complicated as we move forward in creating different water plans. We do have less than 1,500 tribal members at this moment. This map right here is a really good map because it shows the different land status, and you can see just by the different colors how complicated any type of water situation can complicate or overcomplicate moving water from one place to another. My tribe has 7 rivers that flow through our reservation, which is very unique compared to other reservations. And even though we do have 7 rivers, we have about 129,000 acre feet that flows through our reservation, which is the federal reserved water rights. Our surface, we do get most of our water from our surface water rights, and most of our water comes from the San Juan tributary through the Colorado River. So we're not right off the Colorado River. Again, it's off of the tributaries. And we rely strictly on snowpack for our water. And with the current drought conditions, it greatly impacts what we do for how we get our water. We do have 3 water storages within the reservation. For our reservation, we have Lemon, the Dam, Vicito, and both of these storage projects are about 70% full at this time. And that's about what it's going to be for the rest of the year because of the snowpack in the upper basin. We've had a lot of dirt on snow from the winds, and which causes the snow to melt faster. And because we're already in a dry situation, that water automatically gets absorbed into the soil. So there's very little runoff going into any one of these reservoirs. And Vicito Reservoir, we get most of our potable water from that, and it flows through the Pine River. And the Pine River is where we get most of our potable water, our main water source for the town of Ignacio and our residents within that are close to the town of Ignacio. Lake Nighthorse, we do have 38,000 acre feet, but we do not have an infrastructure in place along with our sister tribe, the Ute Mountain Ute. In order for us to be able to use that water, we need to have an infrastructure put into place, which makes things a little bit more difficult. Even though this is on the driest side of my reservation, there's no way for us to use it right now. And if we could use that water, I think it would solve a lot of our other water situations that go on with the reservation. We, the Southern Ute Tribe, do have our own water treatment plants, and we're very proud of our water treatment plant. Our water treatment plant has provided a lot of quality water for our tribal residents and non-tribal residents. We have less than 500 households that receive potable water from our treatment plant, and many of these homes are non-tribal homes, and it's because of the checkerboard nature of the reservation. Again, in order for us to supply water to our tribal members, we have to supply water to non-tribal members. And again, so our water treatment plant gets most of our water, or I guess all of our water, from the Pine River. We have a junior water rights on the Pine River, which makes it our water treatment plant vulnerable to any calls that come on the river. We will be second in line. And up until 2 years ago or so, we had the capacity of storing water in our raw water storage pond of 1 day. That was very problematic for us. And so now with the new water storage raw water pond, we have the capacity to store up to 28 days, which greatly helps us as we go forward. To overcomplicate it, let me see if this is the next slide. If we wanted to increase the capacity of our water storage delivery system, it becomes very complicated, again, because of the checkerboard nature. If we were even to try and to increase the pipe size, we would have to get approval from not just the state, but non-tribal landowners, the irrigation districts, the county, the state, and the list goes on and on and on, which overcomplicates a very simple project to help people to get water. But because of, again, the checkerboard nature, our federal status, and our sovereign nature of our reservation, of our tribe, it does become very complicated, and it creates a very lengthy process. Regardless of the fact that we have our own water treatment plant, many of my tribal residents pay to have their water hauled either through our water utilities division, or families choose to haul water themselves. It becomes very costly, and sometimes it's a lot of hard work, especially for our elders that don't have the capacity to have their water hauled to them, or something happens to to whatever, their water structure near their home. When I grew up, this is still a normal stage of life. When I grew up in a home that didn't have running water up until I was about 12. And life becomes very hard when you don't have running water in your home. We have different water storages within our reservation. Again, this strip of land is 75 miles long, 15 miles wide. But we have over 5,000 wells within this area, and less than 400 belong to the tribe and tribal members. Again, that depletes our groundwater quality. Again, hauling water becomes an issue, and because everybody else is drawing water from our groundwater wells. Like I stated earlier, we depend on our snowpack in the mountains. Again, Vicedo is about 70% full, and that's the capacity that's going to happen this year, and it's our main water source. We're hoping for snow, for rain, whatever moisture we can get throughout the year, because that really helps us as we go throughout the year. Along with the dry conditions of not having water, we also have to worry about fires. And just recently, last week, we had a fire here and burned up to 89 acres of land. It's 100% contained right now, but these are all very real issues for us. So either we have, with dry conditions, we have to worry about the fires and fire mitigation. So a lot of these, actually, I must skip this slide. So with our local drought, again, seeing that we have lower or very low capacity within all of our watershed areas, our different storages. Going forward, we need to be very cognizant of how much water we're using as a community. It doesn't just affect Native Americans, it affects everybody in our entire area. Let's get that one too. So with that, my tribe has become very proactive. We created a drought management plan and we passed this in 2019. So with this plan, there's different triggers that are developed into the plan, and the more stringent the trigger, the more stringent the response is going to be. And this year, I believe, is the second time that we're going to implement one of the triggers, and that means that our irrigators are going to have a shorter irrigation season. So I believe our water will be turned off in, I believe, end of July, maybe August, in that time frame. So going forward, having these different triggers built in is going to be very, very important for us, and everybody else has to understand as well too what those mean and how we're going to respond to that, which means everybody's going to, again, have to work together. Like Chairman Hart had stated earlier, it doesn't affect just one person, it's going to affect all of us. We also, with our drought management plan, this is one of the responses here with on the slide for the drought management plan. So the first trigger in Vicedo, if it doesn't fill the capacity, then it is that irrigators are going to have a shorter season. With all of these different headlines that we see almost daily, again, it's going to be really important that that we start working together. And we know with the new Colorado River Management Framework that's in process, we know that right now is a time that it is the best time for us to determine how tribes are going to use their the unused water that are flowing down the river. Again, my tribal council has created a water use options team, which is very unique because it's a collaboration of our tribal staff, tribal members, and trying to figure out how can we create and develop our unused tribal water that's going to benefit everyone within our reservation boundaries for our benefit of our tribal people. having our tribal members involved in this process is important because they're the end users of this water. Knowing and understanding what their needs are is how we need to respond to specifically not having enough water. How can we help them to maintain a good quality of life and still provide for their family, provide for what they need to, and still try and use less water as we can, but do what we can for our people. We also, that's another slide there. So this is the water use options team. Again, you can see that there's the different staff that will be in this. Having a collaboration like this has never been done before. And so getting everyone to work together is going to be very unique. And they've already had their first meeting May 17th. And so right now we're in the beginning stages, and I think it's going to be really important to see what the outcome is going to be. And just one of my final thoughts, like Chairman Hart has stated, in 1922 is when the Colorado River Compact was created and signed off. Tribes were not included in any of these situations. We weren't included in the discussion. We weren't included when they signed it. We were just included years later when they told us how we can use our water. Previously, we've always been the stewards of our water. We know that the Creator placed us in the Rocky Mountains. This is where our creation started. We don't have a migration story. We've always been in this area of the Colorado Rocky Mountains. It's always been our home. We've always knew how to take care of the water. And so being able to share that with everybody else and how to take care of the water and to take care of the spirits of those waters. This is not just one spirit. Every body of water has a different spirit of water. Just like you and I have a spirit, our water has a spirit as well too. And how do we care for that? It's not just creating a project or developing the water. It's how do we care for it so that Mother Nature can continue to nourish us as we go forward. But it wasn't until 1924 that we actually became American citizens within our own country. And finally, up until recently, we were starting to, I guess, people are realizing we do have the capacity to develop our own water. We know how to care for the water again. And so going forward, having tribes being involved in the management of the Colorado River is so important. Like Chairman Hart stated again earlier, we met with Interior Secretary Deb Haaland. That was very significant, a very significant event for us. It was historical, is what everybody has been saying, but nothing right now in 2022 with the Colorado River should be historic. Yet we're still having historical moments because now people at those higher levels are starting to listen to tribes and to hearing our voices, hearing our concerns of what we need. Going forward, that still needs to continue. We still need to continue educating people on who we are as people, what our needs are, because every tribe is different. But going forward, we need to be in the management discussions of the Colorado River system because it affects all of us. And tribes right now with the 25% capacity or allocation of the entire river system, it's really important that we're there and that we work together because tribes could eventually be the solution to some of the water shortages. But what that solution is, I don't know. But going forward, having collaborative talks is really important and working together. The way. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Cloud. We've had some really powerful presentations. So thank you and Chairman Hart for being here. We have one last speaker to tell us more about what it looks like as we move forward in the Colorado River Basin. So I welcome Amy Ostdiek with the Colorado Water Conservation Board.
Thank you so much. I'm hoping you can see my screen. My name is Amy Ostdiek, and I manage the Interstate Federal and Water Information section at the Colorado Water Conservation Board. And a lot of the work I do there is really based around supporting Commissioner Becky Mitchell as the state's primary negotiator on Colorado River interstate matters. And I'm really proud to say that Commissioner Mitchell has really prioritized engagement with the tribal nations in Colorado. And not only on current efforts implementing the drought contingency plans in the post-2026, looking at the post-2026 operations of the major reservoirs, but just generally, I think she's really committed to looking at how we can better develop those relationships and do what we can to elevate tribal voices. So I'm really proud to be a part of her team. And I'm going to talk a little bit today about both how the tribes have played important roles in the implementation of the 2019 DCP's drought contingency plans, and also just a little bit about looking forward the post-2026 negotiations and the sovereign to sovereign engagement framework that Commissioner Mitchell has also been working on with the tribes. I will keep it pretty short. I only have a couple slides, but I did just want to start with DCP implementation and the kind of the components of that and how the tribes have been involved. I won't talk very much about lower basin components, but a couple things that they've worked on as part of their DCP. Tier 1 shortages in the lower basin for Arizona and Nevada, meaning they had committed to take less water out of Mead when it dropped to a certain level, and that trigger has been met recently. And also their intentionally created surplus program, which is a program under which water can be banked in Lake Mead for later use. And I'll just note here that the tribes in the lower basin were really critical to getting those agreements across the finish line and to implementing them. And I think that it would have been difficult to get all that work done without those really, really important roles of the tribes. But I do just want to focus a little bit more on the upper basin. A couple components of the upper basin DCP. One is the demand management feasibility investigation that has been ongoing across the upper basin for a few years now. And that concept is temporary, voluntary, and compensated reductions in consumptive use across the upper basin. And then that water would be used to create a pool in Lake Powell that could be used for ongoing compact compliance, to assure ongoing compact compliance. And, we in Colorado set up various work groups. We looked at a lot of issues relating to demand management, and we thought it was really a priority to make sure that we were working closely with the Ute Mountain Ute and Southern Ute tribes in Colorado, because we would imagine that they would play an important role in any potential demand management program, and wanted to make sure that we were really considering what unique issues might be raised relating to the tribes. So that is an ongoing investigation. We anticipate that we'll have a little bit more information in the fall as the UCRC, the Upper Colorado River Commission, wraps up some of their investigations. That will, like I said, kind of keep going. And then the Drought Response Operations Agreement, another component of the Upper Basin DCP, which calls for the release of water from upper basin reservoirs to help protect critical elevations at Lake Powell, specifically defined as elevation 3525 at Powell. So when it looks like that trigger elevation might be met in reclamation's modeling, that means that we all have to talk and figure out how and whether to send water down, essentially, from the initial units, Flaming Gorge, Blue Mesa, and Navajo reservoirs in the upper basin to protect Lake Powell. And I don't want to get into a lot of detail on that, but I will say is that the way that was kind of structured and has been structured is that there are a number of work groups looking at various components of that, things like the timing of the water, the effectiveness, impacts on other resources. And it was recently agreed upon that the tribes would have a seat at the table for all those work groups, which I think is a really positive development. And I'll just note here that pursuant to that agreement, 500,000 acre feet will be released from Flaming Gorge Reservoir between now and the spring of 2023. And that is on top of 161,000 acre feet of water that was already previously released. So that's a total of 661,000 acre feet going from upper basin reservoirs to protect Lake Powell. So that's pretty significant when you compare that against water use in the upper basin. One other thing that I'll just mention here is this shortage concept. You know, the lower basin states took shortages for the first time from their Lake Mead apportionments. And as Councilwoman Cloud mentioned, there was a lot of press about that, and it was you know, kind of seen as a very big deal in the press. And I think what that highlighted for us is the need to really let everyone across the basin know what it looks like in the upper basin. Our water users face shortages nearly every year. Our uses are variable because they're dependent on snowpack. We've you know, lived within the means of the river, and I think that the tribes in Colorado understand that better than most. Looking at the significant shortages faced in the Southwest, you know, that's just something that it's not really understood across the basin, and we're kind of trying to get that message out so that people get it, that this is a struggle that we in the upper basin have been facing for years now. So that's kind of what's been ongoing. Again, these agreements were reached in 2019. All of those will expire at the end of 2025, as will the current rules in place for the operations of Powell and Mead, the 2007 guidelines. So as we've been looking at what comes next and kind of preparing for those negotiations, in Colorado, we've really been thinking a lot about how to best make sure that the voices of the tribal nations are included in that process. It's been, like I said, a priority for Commissioner Mitchell. So she has prioritized developing this sovereign to sovereign engagement framework that will really kind of lay out the commitments that she's making to have that meaningful engagement, and also just kind of outlining what that process will look like. I do want to be really clear here that, you know, the scope of the negotiations is really kind of limited to the operation of Powell and Mead. So this process can't resolve everything. It's important that a lot of work kind of continue in parallel. But notwithstanding that fact that they're somewhat limited, this is still obviously pretty important. So again, kind of engagement, sovereign to sovereign engagement is going to be imperative to making sure that those negotiations are successful. And just some of the goals for that kind of framework is really, it's to create a space for candid and frank discussion between Colorado state representatives and tribal representatives. Make sure we have a space to talk openly about the challenges and opportunities that we might face in negotiations, and identify what some shared goals might be throughout that process. We also want to make sure that we're bringing in the best available information, the best available science, including Indigenous knowledge, and trying to do all this while working within the law of the river. So I think I'll go ahead and stop there. You know, I know I covered a lot. There's just happens to be a whole lot happening on the Colorado River right now, partly due to hydrology that we're dealing with, and partly due to the fact that some of these agreements are expiring soon. So it'll be really, really important that we continue to work closely together as we move through everything the future holds. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy, and another big thank you to all of our speakers. I'm going to now invite everybody to participate in a full group question and answer time. So at this point, you might want to switch your view to gallery view so you can see everyone. And if you'd like to pose a question, you can either type it into the chat or try raising your hand, or just jump in and ask the question. And I think we're gonna kick it off with Steve to get us started.
Sure, thanks, Caitlin. And maybe a question for Chairman Hart and Councilwoman Cloud. You both mentioned the infrastructures you need to fully develop your water rights to provide tribal water security. How do you see the state of Colorado and Southwestern District can support you to move forward to find solutions to those infrastructure needs?
From Ute Mountain Ute Tribe, we are looking at the legislation that was passed by Congress to get it from Lake Nighthorse over. There is already a design in place to bring it over. It's just getting money to funding to get it from there to there, from point A to point B. I'm pretty sure the same way with Southern Ute and what their initiatives are. We also are looking at some of the water line that comes down from Cortez from the treatment plant, and the pipe that comes down it doesn't have the cathodic protection that it does. So it's costing us about $300,000 to $500,000 every time we'll have a water break. So it goes back to partnerships and finding the funding that we need. So what we need to do is reach out to Southwest Water Conservancy District, Montezuma Valley Irrigation, our treatment facility, but also working with our sister tribe in a partnership to advocate and going back to Congress and saying, could some of this infrastructure bill money be allocated towards some of these projects that weren't allocated in the past? So working with the water districts and the state, I think would really help us out in a partnership from Ute Mountain Ute Tribe.
I think from Southern Ute, Chairman Hart actually gave a great answer, but for Southern Ute, because we know that this is again on our driest side of the reservation, and all how can we're trying against our water use options team is going to be coming up with some of these different hopefully solutions on what we can do, but the infrastructure is the biggest hurdle that we have. How can we get this water out and divert it to where we need it to be? The graphical area that is there is also an impediment, and it's not we can't like do gravity feed to another area of the reservation on that side. So what can we do? And so coming up with a solution, again, we're going to have to be creative and figure that out as we go forward.
Great, thank you. Caitlin, I saw a couple of questions in the chat. Do you want to read those?
Yeah, so the first one I think may have been answered, but the second one was a follow-up on that. So, so the first question was, why are the Southern Ute water rights on the Pine River junior if they're based on the 1868 treaty? But the follow-up is, how is the administration number for the settlement determined? What is the priority date and the adjudication date?
And
What?
I know I have one of my water resource, a couple of them are on this panel, and I think they can answer that probably better than I do. But when Aaron Wilson did answer the question in the chat on as far as our junior water rights, and all of the tribes, Southern Ute tribes, all of our water is settled, and most of our water rights go back to the priority date of the 1868 when the reservation was created from the Winters Doctrine. And I don't know if like as far as the other question, I don't know. I don't have an answer for that one.
Thank you. Scott, did you have something to add?
Well,
or are you good?
No, Councilwoman Cloud got it right. I mean, the rights are treated with an 1868 priority date. There are a couple of small streams on the reservation where there was some subordination, but the majority of the rights are with the 1868 priority and the first right on the stream.
Great. I see a hand up from Amarina. Sorry if that's not your pronunciation of your name. If you want to speak up and unmute yourself, you can ask the question.
Said my name right. My name's Amarina. I just wanted to first say thank you to all the speakers. This has been a very informative talk. So I have a question for for Chairman Hart and for Councilwoman Lorelei Cloud. Can you offer lessons from the Ute water settlement process for ongoing efforts to include tribes in water decision making and to direct funding towards infrastructure?
Do you want to go first, Chairman?
Say the question again. You wanted to, I couldn't hear you.
Okay, can you offer lessons from the Ute water settlement process towards the ongoing efforts to include tribes in water decision making and also to direct funding towards infrastructure for that water?
Yes, I think that'd be something that'd be very beneficial in helping us move forward. I did want to go back to one of the questions earlier. This is part of the learning process also, is we also had to subordinate our water rights off the Mancos River to get, we had to give up something to get something. And that priority date from 1868 went to a 1988.
Yes.
1988, so that gave us a junior water right on that. So we always try to educate people, but yes, I think lessons would be great if we could have people that are really interested in tribal water rights. And it pertains to a lot of tribes in general, because each tribe is different in their own way. As Councilman Cloud mentioned, hers is checkerboard allotments, where ours is one contiguous land of trust land. So as you start to educate yourself, then you understand both types of land. They have a lot of non-tribals that live on their land, whereas we don't. We just have two big communities with limited infrastructure. So yes. Hopefully I answered your question.
I think also for Southern Ute, being involved in the process, especially like going forward in the new negotiations of the guidelines, having our voice heard within all of these different areas, and there's a question in the chat that this can probably answer as well too, because it's asking if we'd be leasing water to Las Vegas or Los Angeles. That's part of it. As tribes, we cannot lease water past state lines. And so that's very much an impediment for us. We're being told how we can use our water, and how again, other municipalities or other groups, they don't have the restrictions that tribes do. And again, we have a large portion of the river. How can we help? Well, that's part of it, is removing those restrictions, because again, to me, this is just my personal opinion, is because they thought that we were incapable of making those decisions. They wanted to make those decisions for us. And we know that we're able and we're capable of making decisions on how we can best use the water for our own people, and how we can develop that water that's going to benefit us as people. And so there's all of these different impediments that are built into the current system that we're trying to negotiate again with the different guidelines that are coming up. How can we change that? That's going to help us as people, Ute people, Indian people within the whole Colorado River system. And so hope that answers your question. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And we had a question, another one. Is the 10 Tribes Partnership involved in the forming of the 2026 Colorado River Basin Guidelines? And then a comment following that was, I know it has been a goal to be able to participate in this.
Could I have Mike answer that one?
About the 10 tribes involvement?
Because that was the question.
I mean, I can start the answer, and then maybe Chairman Hart can add to it. One of the important things that the 10 Tribes Partnership accomplished was to get reclamation to go back and redo their studies and incorporate tribal water rights into their quantification. And before, those were invisible. Those rights were invisible. So with that step forward, then I think the question becomes how those rights get exercised and are brought to some kind of fruition. And I think what was said before, each tribe has a little, a different situation, a different context. But I mean, just in observation of the 10 tribes, the fact that they have banded together and stuck together got them into the water quantification regime. And now it's a question of they're going to have to act individually as tribes, but also stay unified in terms of the role that tribes play and protecting each other's opportunities to take advantage or to address critical water needs.
Yeah, thank you for that, Mike. I just wanted to add a little bit onto that. Each tribe is unique, and to sometimes accomplish something through legislation like the Colorado River ALP project. It was hard for tribes to do it themselves, so they had to partner to make it become reality, but it took about 50 years to do. And it went through a lot of administrations, both on the tribal and US government side, but also once they band together, they also have a little bit more strength, a little bit more commonality in some of these issues. Tribes are the most regulated ethnic group in this country on anything across the board. And Indian laws are becoming more predominant in all different areas. So it's really something that we have a big challenge, but once we group together and we come as one tribal nation, as a 10 tribes partnership, then it has more strength. But it's all about educating people about what our priorities are. As Lorelei Cloud mentioned, we're limited on what we can use the water for. If we get it to our reservation, then we have more control of what the use could be. If I did not want to use it for M&I and I want to focus on ag, then I could. That's the main priority, is to get it to the reservation and have our own storage for our own use for the future.
So I wanted to add on, when we're talking about the tribal water study, that was a big undertaking. And I was so glad that the BOR decided that that they would create a tribal water study. That was really important because that helped the basin to understand how important it is for tribes to be part of the management system, because it showed them literally on fact, on black and white, that the tribes, 10 tribes out of 30 had 25% of the allocation of the entire river system. That's very significant for any group to have that much allocation for them. But going forward, even we had a 10 tribes meeting yesterday, and the BOR presented their modeling. Their modeling didn't include tribal water. And so modeling going forward really needs to change as well too, because there needs to be a section showing how much water is in for the tribes in their modeling system. That's going to help not just the tribes themselves to see what that is, but it's also going to help everyone else as well too, to see again how valuable tribes are going to be as we go forward in the negotiations of the new guidelines. And even past that, the guidelines, how are we going to be able to work together within this Colorado River system?
Well, thank you for these amazing presentations, beautiful answers. It was great to hear from all of you. We're really thankful for you participating as our speakers. Thanks for everyone for joining us, and we're out of time, but let's keep this conversation going. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.